The road to the perfect building. That's a big topic. So I think maybe I'll limit myself instead, if you don't mind. But first I want to say it's wonderful to be back here in Germany at Lighten Building. It's great to see you all again after a long time of not seeing you. And what I want to talk about today is the cybersecurity roadmap for building automation systems. Right? So it's a journey, right? There's not like you do one thing and you have cybersecurity all figured out. It really is a journey, and we're on this journey together. So I want to tell you just a little bit about the parts of the journey that I see and how we can do them in a very effective way. So let me get started here. First of all, let me acknowledge that what I'm going to talk about is drawn from a webinar that was held in July with 3 panelists. I was on the panel, Jim Lee from Symmetrics was on the panel, and Carol DeMonaco from JCI was on the panel, where we talked about cybersecurity roadmaps and some of the challenges around that. So if you want to see the full recording of that hour-long webinar, and you want to find the questions and answers that were posted after the webinar, you can go to the BACnetinstitute.org and you'll find it there. So this is more the highlights of that. So I'm going to start with this roadmap discussion, and then I'll move on to the importance and the implications of being IT compatible as we do it, because both of those are important topics, and they're related, but they're not the same. They're a little bit different. Well, let's start with this. I'm going to talk on the roadmap discussion a little bit about why should you care. I'm guessing you all do because you're here, but nonetheless, we'll talk about it for a minute. Some core principles that guide the community as we add more cybersecurity capabilities to our systems and our products and our solutions. And then a little bit about the acceleration process for cybersecurity that's gone on the last couple of years. And then a little bit about the proposed acceleration going forward, because there's a transition coming there. So let me start with this, right? So why should you care? Well, if you just Google, right, cybersecurity breaches of building automation systems, it's not too hard to find examples of ones that are actually publicly known. This one, for example. The owner's locked out of the building, all their systems not working. This is not a good thing. Or this one, right? In Finland, residents can't heat their apartments, and it's all remotely managed from Central Europe. So there's nobody in Finland to fix it unless they fly there to go fix it, which is what they did. Again, a huge, huge cost, both in terms of dollars, but also in terms of reputation of the management company. Ransomware, a hotel in Austria, you can't get in and out of your hotel rooms. That's kind of a problem. And it's not just Europe, right? There are examples in China. There's examples in North America. It's a challenge that has to be dealt with, and that's one of the reasons you should care. Now, I'm going to go through this chart word by word, right? You ready for this? Okay, so I'm not going to do that, I promise. But the point of the chart really is that the connectivity increases in building automation, which are essential to achieve our objectives, right? We have to have connectivity if we're going to have energy management that's good, and occupant comfort, and intelligent buildings and smart cities. So increasing connectivity is good, but it's been paralleled with increasing threats. Because with more connectivity, there's more places, more parts of the system to be invaded. And it's not just the building automation system, right? It's also using the building automation system to ease your way into the overall IT infrastructure and get at enterprise applications. So the challenge is significant, and it's getting more significant. So that's another reason you should care. It's expensive, right? No matter what report you look at, it's expensive, and it's more expensive than the reports say, because an awful lot of this work isn't reported, at least not in a public way where you can just pull out from Google. Now, we also know people care because every time we do something related to cybersecurity, we have a lot of people pay attention to it. So over the course of about 4 months or 5 months last year, we put 3 different videos up on YouTube relating to cybersecurity and BACnet SC. And in a course of 6 months, had well over 1,000 views of those videos. So it's clear that there are people who care. We also know that people care because suppliers are doing things to incorporate more security in their BACnet products. And they don't do that for the fun of it. They do it because their customers are asking for it. So we know that customers are asking for it because suppliers are doing it. In terms of participation in PlugFest that impact SC or are targeted at SC, in terms of BTL certified products that have BACnet SC in them, and a continuing demand for testing and certification of BACnet SC products. So it's clear that the suppliers understand there's a demand, and that comes from the users. So if you're a user and you don't care, you might want to talk to your peers, because someone out there in the user world cares a lot. So what are these core principles I talked about? Right, let me talk about what they are and why they're important. So the first one is building owners need cybersecurity that's appropriate to their business needs. Right? There are different business needs with different kinds of buildings and different applications with different threat profiles and different risk profiles. So whatever we do has to be flexible enough to accommodate those differences and requirements. Otherwise, we'll have a solution that's perfect for the most secure place and too expensive for the simplest. Or we'll have one that's inexpensive enough for the simplest, but isn't secure enough for the most complex. So we need this ability to be flexible, just like BACnet itself is, from little systems to big systems to campus systems to global systems. The second principle is that we've spent 30 years building interoperability around core systems. We can't give it up in order to get cybersecurity. So we need interoperable cybersecurity, not just cybersecurity. And that's a critical point. It's a critical point for us. BACnet is the core integration platform to get interoperability among building automation system components today. So cybersecurity for buildings has to be built into BACnet. Now, BACnet SC provides a core new capability for BACnet that's essential, and more importantly, it's interoperable across all BACnet SC products. The standard continues to evolve. Like I started with, cybersecurity is not just you do something and you have it. It's a journey that continues and continues and continues. And the next step after BACnet SC was Addendum CC, which added some interoperable management tools to the interoperable exchange of data. And there's going to be more, as we'll see coming out of the committee. Now, a practical reality is there are some components of building automation cybersecurity that really aren't suitable for BACnet standardization. They're outside the scope of a protocol. They're outside the scope of what BACnet itself can do. But we as an industry still have to deal with them. We can't just ignore it because they're not part of the BACnet sphere in terms of the protocol. The other core principle is that IT moves faster than building automation. That's not a surprise to any of us. We all know that. We get a new phone every couple of years. We get a new PC every few years. We get a new building equipment system every 30 years, 20 years, whatever it is. So as a practical matter, IT moves faster, and security is part of IT, so we need to figure out how to move building automation cybersecurity at the speed of IT, not at the speed of building automation historically. So these are the core principles that as an industry we need to incorporate as we go forward with BACnet and building automation cybersecurity. Now let's talk about this journey for a minute. All right, so the journey started with we need to be able to have interoperable data exchange. We need to have interoperable systems in the first place. So for many years, that's what BACnet has focused on doing. So that was sort of the first part, the blue part of our road, if you will. And BACnet SC came along, and BACnet SC now has added another set of capabilities which are really tied to making sure the devices on the network belong there, authentication, and making sure the messages between them can't be tampered with, right? Encryption. So those are the things that BACnet SC has added to, in an interoperable way, the exchange of messages and the exchange of data and control that were built up over BACnet systems over the years. And then the third part of our journey was what comes next, right? So you might wonder, is there more to do? And the answer is yes, there's more to do. There are applications where it's important to know the person sending a request to a device has the right to send it, that they're authorized to send it. So there's this interoperable authorization to do. there's also a whole need to be able to manage systems in cybersecurity and do that in a secure, interoperable way. So it's not enough to have cybersecurity when you first turn the system on. You have to be able to maintain it, and you have to be able to manage it, and that needs to be interoperable. So there's more work to do there. So that's the roadmap. Now let's talk about how we go down that road faster and faster and faster. Because we all know that historically this industry moves at a pace that's slower than IT. Let's leave it at that. So a particular effort was put together a couple of years ago to try to accelerate the cybersecurity work, pulled out of the BACnet's global community a set of companies organized by Symmetrics to try to do some extra work outside the formal committee process and feed in ideas and thoughts and proposals to the BACnet committee on how to improve security in BACnet. And at the same time, create a document, a guideline document for manufacturers that would say, here's how you might want to use those security features in BACnet, and here's some things outside of BACnet you might want to do, so that if we all do them, we'll have interoperable management. We'll have interoperable things beyond what BACnet can do for us. So that document and those suggestions were created by this group, and those are now done. They're available. But the project's not done, because in order to turn that into meaningful, globally useful work, we need to take that document and put it into an ASHRAE process to get an ASHRAE standard publication out of it. So that's going to happen. It's been submitted to ASHRAE and moving along its way. Now the document itself, which you can get now, right, it's available now in its draft form, not from ASHRAE, but it's available now. And it's written primarily for people who are building products, right? This is product managers and developers. It's not really designed for end users and design consultants, although some of it might prove interesting. Most of it will prove boring, I think, to them. It's really designed for product people. And it makes a lot of recommendations that will improve interoperable behavior among systems that choose to go down that path. And it's intended to be a path that will come out of the standard in the future. So it's both useful and practical. If you want a copy of the guide today, you can find it in the BACnetinstitute.org. You go there, you go to the library section, and you search cybersecurity, and you'll find that and a couple other things that might be useful. So that's where we are now. But we're not done. There's more to do. So how do we move this forward? So the Symmetrics initiative is dissolving because now it's time to bring it into a broader global community framework. So it's proposed that we create a cybersecurity acceleration program as a follow-on to the BACnet SC acceleration program we put together 2 years ago, using the same kind of format with the same idea, that basically the program will help create ideas for the committee, the standards committee, continue to publish these voluntary standards that will get submitted into ASHRAE to be published as ASHRAE documents, and focus on how to revise the ASHRAE document over time as we learn more and more of the standard gets done so more things can be put into the guideline document. Another piece of what the program will do is to help suppliers get where they need to be faster by building reference implementations of key parts of the BACnet cybersecurity components. Like we built a reference implementation for BACnet SC, this program will build a reference implementation for authentication, probably a reference implementation for authorization, and certainly a reference implementation for addendum CC. So that's the intent of the program. If you are with a company where that program might be useful to you, you can contact Dave Nardone, and he'll connect you with the progress of it and let you know what you need to do to be involved in it. If you want a little more, a description of this roadmap that you can hand to somebody else, you can go to the BACnetinternational.org site and the journal section, and you'll find it as a journal article in the most recent journal. All right. So that's the roadmap session in 15 minutes plus or minus 2, I think. Now let's talk about another part of this challenge. which is that it's really important that we fully adopt IT technologies and best practices, because IT is the focal point for cybersecurity advances, right? That's where cybersecurity technology is coming from. So important that we do that, and it's important to them that we do that, because building automation is a clear path to breach enterprise systems. The more we integrate, the more we provide smart buildings, the more we tie things together, then the more concerned they should be and we should be that the work we do compromises enterprise systems that have nothing to do with us, but are incredibly important to our customers. So that's one of the reasons we need to stay aligned with, in fact, get more aligned with IT and best practices in IT. The other reason is that IT is working on cybersecurity at a pace we never will. Right? They have huge resources in the IT community focused on cybersecurity. So they're driving a lot of progress and a lot of knowledge. We need to take advantage of that. We don't need to duplicate it. We certainly don't want to ignore it. So to take full advantage of it, then we need to align our work and our solutions to IT solutions. Now, why wouldn't we do that anyway, you might ask? Well, traditionally, we haven't, right? Traditionally, we solve our cybersecurity problems by either separating our network logically or physically, or building in firewalls and other router functions in an attempt to keep the networks independent of each other so that we don't have to worry about the interaction as much. And that was a fine solution when there wasn't so much connectivity, and a fine solution when there weren't so many bad actors trying to invade enterprise systems through building automation. It's not such a good solution anymore. And that's why BACnet Secure Connect was created. Right? BACnet SC is a huge step forward. As I said before, it's not the end of the road, but it's a big step forward in the road toward making cybersecurity inherent in the BACnet protocol, and therefore inherent in systems. End-to-end encryption and authentication for every device on the network are pretty fundamentally valuable. But in doing that, BACnet SC was built with the perspective that we need to be IT-friendly. We need to be compatible with IT. So when you look at BACnet SC, you're going to find out it uses IT's standard transport protocol, right, TCP, with secure WebSockets. That's what IT uses. So this makes perfect sense to them. You're going to find that it has encrypted messages, and those messages are encrypted based on an IT standard, right? TLS3, that's what IT uses. Same thing with device authentication, right? We're going to use security certificates, just like your PC has, like your server has. The same things that IT uses, we're using in BACnet SC. Now, some other things that happen when you use BACnet SC is you make the entire system a little bit more compatible with the way IT works. For example, you don't have to have static IP addresses anymore. Now, IT can provide static IP addresses, but they don't like to. And they don't like to for really good reasons. Like when they reconfigure their network, it all gets messed up. And they have to do a whole lot of work to straighten it out. The other thing is it eliminates these BBMD devices and potential broadcast storms, which are always make IT a little nervous, because that's not the way they do things. And finally, it's compatible with the existing BACnet IT, or the BACnet infrastructure. So those IT departments that are already engaged in how do I deal with this BACnet stuff, they're going to say, oh, I got it. This is just another piece of that. So all of these things help reach the goal of IT-friendly while driving toward greater cybersecurity built into the BACnet protocol and therefore built into building automation. Now, this is BACnet SC in a nutshell. It's in here because I thought I should put it in here. I'm not going to go through it because you don't want to hear it and I don't want to talk through it. But if you get a copy of the slides and want to read through it, go for it. I'm fine with that. So interoperable cybersecurity, including interoperable management, is what we need to get to. Right? Nothing less than that will do. And BACnet SC and the follow-on to that, combined with the recommendations that will show up in the ASHRAE document based on the manufacturer's guide, will lead us to this industry-wide interoperable and resilient framework to manage secure systems interoperably. And that's what we're trying to do. That's where we want to get. Now you might ask, so what needs to be managed? What's sort of the scope of this whole thing? Turns out there are quite a few things. One is device onboarding. Right? When you have secure networks, things need to be added to the network in a way that the network knows they belong there. So there's some onboarding to be done, and you want that to be managed. Certificate management. Right? In typical IT platforms and in BACnet SC, every device has a certificate. So how do we manage those certificates? How do we update them when they expire? How do you do that across a system with thousands of devices in it? All that has to be done. It's got to be managed. There's asset management. There's actually physical devices you want to keep track of. There's routing firewall policies that need to be managed across the network. As IT migrates into OT and goes back to IT, that all has to be managed somehow. And of course, network and security configuration. It doesn't just come this way. You actually have to do something to configure it. Backup and restore has to be handled because no matter how good we are, someday, someplace, something's going to be breached, and you need to be able to go back and recover what was there before. Same with server and controllers. You have to be able to recover those things, and quickly, if you're running a building. Version and firmware tracking, that's sort of a fundamental need of managing. And finally, IT integration has to be managed. And then the BACnet migration of non-SC has to be managed. So there's a lot to be managed. Right? So in this process of figuring out how does IT manage things, how do we manage things, how can we make them more alike, there's a lot to be done. And to do it right, we have to be compatible with IT. Now it gets a little more interesting when we ask, how does cybersecurity get paid for? Right? You have a fundamental problem, and buildings get paid for when they're built. And then there's no more budget, or not much. Interestingly enough, that's different than IT. Right? IT gets paid for when it's installed and paid for again 3 years later when it's reinstalled and paid for again 3 years later when it's reinstalled. And some part of building automation has to tap into that because the cybersecurity part of building automation is going to have to be following that cybersecurity path. Another good reason to work compatibly with IT is we need our budget to work more like IT's. And that will make sense to people when it behaves like IT, when it's managed as part of IT. So this is a slide that Jim Lee likes to use, right? The DoD budget, DoD number of devices, right? Those all have to be super secure things. Now, all that leads me to say if we're going to be successful, well, not if, in order to be successful, as we go forward, cybersecurity has to be a collaborative process. But it has to cross functions. It has to cross building automation experts. It has to cross IT experts, security experts, management people. It has to be collaborative or it doesn't work. And even across company, because the problems are too big for any one company to solve. That's why we need standards around cybersecurity. Now, some questions that float out of that in individual projects is, okay, if it's collaborative, who actually leads cybersecurity for OT? Is it the building automation vendor? Is it the IT department? Is it the chief security information officer? Who does that? We're going to learn as we go, I think. The second one is who owns it? Right? Whose responsibility at the end of the day is it for cybersecurity across the whole thing? And then the ongoing delivery of service. Right? It's not a one-time deal. You don't install it and you're done. You install it and then you keep monitoring it. You keep looking at it. You keep finding things that don't look right, and then you fix them. So those are issues that have to be solved. And they're only going to be solved collaboratively. So at the end of this, I just want to go back to a couple points. One is everybody cares about cybersecurity, or if they don't, they will. You just have to look at those statistics up front. If they don't yet, they will, and pretty soon. And the industry needs cybersecurity with interoperability, not one or the other. It needs both. To do that in a way that's going to be successful going forward, we have to do it with IT compatibility. We have to be doing as much of our work compatible with IT platforms and processes as we possibly can. And finally, it takes the community to do it. Right? We got BACnet SC done quickly because the community came together to do it. The same is true for accelerating the forward-looking cybersecurity work. That's going to work best when the community comes together to do it. So there you have it, the roadmap to BACnet and building automation and cybersecurity with a little ID compatibility thrown in. Thank you very much. If there are questions, I'm happy to take a few.
So are there any questions at the moment? I could probably start with one. So Andy, what will happen in HVAC installations? We have very often a separate network for building automation. And what happens if there is not a private key infrastructure at the moment? Will BACnet SC then run?
BACnet SC requires the private key infrastructure to exist.
Okay.
And the question would be when and how in the course of a building's development does that happen? Right? And that's going to be project specific. It's just like today if you install BACnet IP, you need to have a network when you put your devices in, and if the building's not done yet, it might not be there, so there needs to be an interim thing. We might see the same thing with security. There might be an interim security certificate management process that's applied by one of the larger suppliers, and people align to that, and then later it transfers to IT, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe IT says, hey, that's fine, do it. Just tell me what you're doing so I can keep track of mine.
So definitely we have to train the consultants that they are aware of that.
There's a lot of training to be done of consultants and integrators, and end users for that matter. Ones who have not dealt with real IT are going to have a different world to live in. They're going to need help from suppliers that can give them full service solutions. They're going to need help from consultants in security, and they're going to need educators. In fact, I've just got involved with a group in the US that's looking at building a very specific cybersecurity specialist certification program for people in our world to be able to do this effectively.
Any other questions at the moment? Okay, then thanks a lot, Andy, for that presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.